Fundamentals of assembling a computer. The following items will be needed for the PC assembly process: anti-static wrist strap and mat, toolkit, computer case with power supply, motherboard with manual, CPU and fan heat sink assembly, RAM, video card, hard drive with the appropriate cable, floppy drive with the appropriate cable, CD-ROM drive with the appropriate cable. Start by preparing the case. Lay the case on its side and attach the motherboard standoffs in the appropriate locations. It may be helpful to examine the motherboard to determine the best standoff locations. Standoffs are small pegs made of a non-conductive material that help avoid short circuits by preventing the motherboard from touching the case. Once they are installed, temporarily move the case aside to work on the motherboard. Lay the motherboard down on the anti-static mat. Retrieve the CPU and locate pin 1. Line up pin 1 of the processor with the keyed corner of the socket on the motherboard. Once lined up properly, the CPU should rest in the socket without any force. After the CPU is seated, adjust the socket lever until it is in a locked position. When the lever is locked, the CPU is secure. Once the processor is secure, attach the heatsink fan assembly using as little force as possible so as not to damage the processor. Plug in the heatsink fan's power plug onto the appropriate power connector. The proper connector can be identified using the motherboard manual. Now install the memory. It may be a good idea to consult the motherboard manual as to which slot the RAM should be installed. Take the memory and line it up with the socket. Slowly seat the memory into the socket. It may help to rock the memory into the socket until secure by gently pushing alternately on the ends of the chip. The motherboard is now ready to be installed in the case. Align the motherboard with the standoffs and set it in the case. The motherboard may need to be pushed back slightly against the I/O plate to get it to line up correctly. Once the motherboard is seated, use the proper screws to secure it to the case. Now connect the front panel LEDs to the motherboard. The proper location for each LED plug should be outlined in the motherboard's manual. Position the computer case so that it is easy to gain access to the drive bays. Locate an empty 3.5-inch bay and push out that bay's cover. Retrieve the floppy drive and line it up with the open bay. Slide it in until the front of the drive lines up with the front of the computer case. Select the screws that are designated for the floppy drive and screw them in both sides. Now retrieve the hard drive and make sure the jumper is set to the master setting. Now line it up with the lower 3.5-inch bay and slide the hard drive in until the screw holes line up with the case rails. Select the proper screws and secure the hard drive to the case. Locate the 5.25-inch bay to be used for the CD-ROM. Reach into the bay and push out the cover for this bay. Retrieve the CD-ROM and make sure the jumper on the back of the drive is set to cable select. Now slide it in from the front of the case. Push it back until it is flush with the front of the case. Select the correct screws and secure the CD-ROM to the case. Locate the proper ribbon cable for the floppy drive. Attach the end with the twist to the back of the floppy drive. Take the other end and connect it to the floppy connector on the motherboard. Make sure pin 1 lines up with the proper pin on the motherboard connector. Retrieve the ribbon cable for the CD-ROM drive. Attach one end of the ribbon cable to the back of the CD-ROM. Then attach the other end to the secondary IDE connector on the motherboard. Retrieve the ribbon cable for the hard drive. Attach one end of the ribbon cable to the back of the hard drive. Then attach the other end to the primary IDE connector on the motherboard. Now connect the power to each installed device. Examine the back of each drive. Find the power connectors on the back of each drive and connect the correct power cables to the CD-ROM drive, the hard drive, and the floppy drive. Next, connect the ATX power connector to the motherboard. It is keyed, so it can only be inserted one way. Now the video card is to be installed. Prepare the expansion slot for the video card by removing the slot cover. Retrieve the video card and insert it into the appropriate slot. If necessary, rock it gently until it is seated in the slot. After the video card is seated, line up the hole in the video card bracket with its corresponding hole in the computer case. Use a case screw to secure the video card to the computer case. The PC is now ready to be booted up for the first time. However, before closing the case, go over everything that has been installed and make sure all connections are secure. Close the cover and secure it with the provided screws. Plug in the power cord, the keyboard, and the monitor. Turn the PC and monitor on. The screen should show the computer running the Power On self-test.